So it was titled Wisdom of the Crowd, MMO Design in the Mobile Era. And a lot of what I focus on in game design borrows from or looks at innovative techniques in building MMOs. And one of the special things I think about MMOs is that they tend, for the players that are drawn to them and invest in them, they tend to stay for a very long time, which is one of the biggest challenges in building mobile games or really games on any platform now. So instead, I kind of unwound from that and looked at what keeps people investing in games for the long term. What parts of design, what things that we build in fun experiences attract people's attention and keep it for the long run. So high level, I describe that as novelty, and I'll get into what I mean by that in a bit. As Mike mentioned, my name is Brett Seyler. I run a game studio called Americana. Prior to that, I was at Unity Technologies. I did strategy and I ran some of their online services business for a couple of years. Before that, I was at Garage Games running the Torque technology business. And in between and sort of throughout, I've done free-to-play economy building and design and consultation for several different companies. This is our team, or parts, a couple shots of where we work. We have a team in San Francisco and a team in Johannesburg. The Johannesburg team I've worked with off and on for almost 10 years. Very, very talented, mostly artists. This is the title we're building. It's called Fortune's Deep. It's best way to describe it probably is a high seas MMO for mobile. We invest pretty deeply in the production quality and depth of the game. You have 3D characters that run your fleet of ships. They have gear. There is a sandbox environment that's shared with every other player in the game, where you can do things like attacks and exploration. And there's sort of loops for multiple different modes of play. There's again, attack, exploration. There's also significant building and resource management. In addition to running Americana, I am an angel investor and advisor to a handful of companies. Most of these are in the game space or have game customers. So that's kind of who I am and what I've done for the past, well, really all my time in games, the past about almost 10 years now. But this talk is really going to be about how to make better games. And as I titled it, we're going to talk about novelty. So novelty is really a good high-level umbrella for, again, what attracts people's attention and what keeps it for the long term. And these tend to be new, different things. Sometimes they're things that are taboo. Sometimes they're unusual. This is, again, it tended to be a very broad umbrella. We're going to drill down a little bit. So what I want to talk about first is how are games novel? When we build games, how are we trying to attract that attention and keep it? So one of the main ways is investing in IP, fiction. Like what is the fantasy that's going to attract a player's interest at a high level? This is, again, I think a good pinnacle example. Whether you know anything about this game, the character, how you play it, what's available to you in it, these kind of images, there's definitely an art and a science to composing them in a way that attracts our attention. They have some familiar things, some things we haven't seen before, and obviously the games industry invests pretty deeply in this. There's also skills and mastery, and again, these dimensions that I'm talking about are they're not mutually exclusive, but they can stand on their own in terms of drawing people's attention. So skills and mastery, there's a lot of ways to look at this. Here's one example. This is a game I enjoy quite a bit. Not me playing, I wish I was this good, but an example of really incredible performance at a game that requires lots of practice and skill development and understanding of gameplay. And this is obviously a very evergreen type of game design, free-to-play shooter, or not a free-to-play shooter, but a multiplayer shooter. So skills and mastery doesn't have to be twitchy and precise. It can be slower paced, like chess. It can be thoughtful and slow. But these are things that humans, we love to get good at these things and make progress toward being masters of them, and that keeps people investing for the long term. The third is depth, and depth is really the appearance of a lot of choice and a lot of content to consume, and at least in delivering on that appearance of a lot of depth is part of what makes MMOs that are successful work in the long term. These systems and content that they don't attract all kinds of players. Some players are turned off by the complexity, but for a subgroup of players, this is a big part of the initial attraction and the ongoing investment in the game. The fourth dimension is immersion. We'll be talking about this a lot. So immersion is really convincing the player, or yourself if you're the player, that you are somewhere else or someone else. And this is getting a lot of attention now because of VR and all the weird, crazy things we're starting to do with VR, and the big leaps really that the technology is taking in being able to convince us that we are somewhere else, and even giving feedback to the player about in this example. I think this is a bird simulator. I haven't tried it. This is from a news story I read about it. So this is definitely novel. I mean, I don't know how many of you actually put on VR goggles. Probably most of you, and tried the experience out. Even if you don't do anything, even if you're just sitting in a room that's not where you are, it's a pretty novel experience. It attracts your attention, and I haven't tried it for many hours or weeks the way I have other games and things that entertain me, but it looks pretty powerful. The fifth is agency. And agency, maybe swap the word for freedom, more kind of like academic term. But I think the pinnacle of agency for successful games so far is probably Grand Theft Auto. Grand Theft Auto's design really attracted users and maintained users' attention for the long term, at least 3, 4, and 5, with the ability to do things that just occur to a player, whether they're kind of taboo things or exploration things. If you're in a helicopter flying over a big city and you decide you want to crash land it on top of a skyscraper and have a shootout with the cops and then go in the building, and all these things that you hope or think might play out in this semi-immersive experience, that they do, even partially, is really a special achievement in design. The last one is connection, and by connection I mean connection to other players. So I'll let this play out. How many of you guys know what this is? There's no audio here. Okay, I see a few hands. If you don't know what this is, and you haven't seen this video, I apologize for there being no audio, but this is from 2000. Yeah, exactly. This is an old World of Warcraft video where one dude, part of a clan, is pretty bored with the clan leader's instructions about how to go through this raid. This is like 2005. Hanging out, waiting while they discuss plans, and eventually loses patience, decides to enter the room, triggering the spawn of all these different NPCs in the raid, and totally uncoordinated. So he's in there, and his teammates have no choice but to follow him, and it's a mess after that. So even though this isn't the most detailed game, even in 2005, World of Warcraft was never the pinnacle of graphics or the pinnacle of agency or the pinnacle of a lot of these other dimensions, but it connected users in a way that was surprising and new to a lot of gamers. So IP and fiction, skills and mastery, depth, immersion, agency, and connection. These are not the only ways to attract and keep players' attention, but they're the primary that I'm aware of in looking at what has stuck with gamers globally. Cool, right? Okay, so I do want to give you guys some applicable takeaways here, and so I'm going to talk about how we apply this. And I'm going to assume that you have some game design knowledge and that you can take some of these high-level insights and apply them to some degree. If you don't know how to, there's tons of material on the web. I've done other talks about some of these pieces that you can dig into. But I also kind of want to give you a snapshot of where I think the opportunity to invest in your business lies. So this is how I look at it. Forget all the game design stuff for a minute, and let's think from the consumer's point of view. And most of what drives market size and consumers' friction toward investing in a thing is cost and convenience. right? So on one end we have stuff that's like really trivially easy to engage with. This is YouTube. This is just like the web in general for the most part, and then inconvenient stuff like going to the theater. And then you have, of course, cost of free, which is most of the internet and a lot of our content that we build. That's the entry fee, and some of these experiences that we design have a prerequisite expense, whether it's for hardware or the price of our games. So, in platform lingo, this is where mobile is. This is where tablets are. This is where consoles are. And again, you can. This isn't precise. This is sort of my best guesses and way to explain this. Consoles aren't. They're not super expensive, but they're sort of gaming dedicated expense for most people. PCs in general, most households have them. They tend to be free, but they're a little less convenient for most people to game on. Even today, I mean, if you're on a Mac, it's not fun. If you don't really know how to deal with the way games introduce bugs or crashes on your machine, not super fun. And the last and most inconvenient is currently VR. This is just today, right? This is unlikely to hold true forever. I think the price of consoles is probably going to zero. I think the price of VR hardware is probably going to zero in the long run. Not like next year, but maybe 5 to 10 years out. But that's a good dimension to consider where the audience lies for games. Right now, the audience is mostly on mobile. There's still a significant audience on the current generation of consoles. PC has a big audience that is probably close to as large as mobile, so you can kind of drag that out. But the VR audience is pretty small and will likely remain small as long as the cost and convenience are adding friction. So now I want to go back and think through what these modes of delivering novelty look like on this kind of access. Like, what if you wanted to bring a really fantastic IP like Star Wars or just about anything that comes to mind, Marvel, Batman, and consider whether there are cost requirements or convenience friction for the user. Where would you place these on these two dimensions? In my view, this stuff's already on mobile. It's coming to mobile faster and faster, but there's already Walking Dead, Star Wars, Marvel. It's everywhere. There's lots and lots of high-end content and very successful IP that's had even billions of dollars of investment at this point in it. Skills and mastery are also readily available on mobile. Now there's the screen itself and the size of the screen and the input design limit some modes of gameplay. You're not going to be pulling off crazy Destiny-style sniper shots on a mobile tablet or phone, and it would be not as impressive if you did, because it's really, there's just less precision in it. But almost every other mode that I can think of developing skills and mastery, slower gameplay, understanding of systems, all that stuff at least can be delivered on mobile if it hasn't already. Depth, again, I don't really see any impediment to delivering very, very deep games on mobile. Immersion right now, if this is the pinnacle of the immersive experience, is extremely expensive and extremely inconvenient. But this is a spectrum, right? Again, think, you've got consoles, or you got mobile on one end, consoles in the middle, PC in the middle-ish, and currently VR, the most expensive and least convenient. I'm also thinking from convenience standpoint, by the way, not just like setup and engagement, but other forms of convenience. Like if you're gaming on your phone and somebody wants to talk to you, for the most part, you just put it away. If you're doing playing a Call of Duty match on a big screen TV, that's still pretty interruptible. If you're in VR, it's less convenient socially and for a number of other reasons that we'll probably learn about as more and more people try this stuff. Agency is another one. We haven't seen something like Grand Theft Auto really on mobile yet, but I don't see any technical or design barriers to delivering something like that on mobile. It's not going to be fast and precise, and you're not going to have, again, crazy shootouts with precision. But for agency, I think about choice and really kind of getting ahead of the player's imagination. So Minecraft's a great example of this. Minecraft is on mobile. It's often less than $5. Not a lot of barrier to entry. And the last is connection. And in some ways, phones and tablets have the lowest barrier to entry here. Most PCs and consoles these days have have an internet connection or require one, but phones, for the most part, it's assumed. It's not always a great connection, but for the most part, it's with people all the time, and that makes doing things with other players in a game pretty convenient and pretty easy. Let me back up a second. So again, these are all just like modes of delivering novelty, and games mix and match these like crazy. But what I wanted to really get across here is that only if your aim in building games that stand out, that attract users and stand out from the crowd, is to invest deeply in any one of these, only one mode of creating novelty really delivers less convenience and more cost to the consumer. Again, that's just today. This probably won't last forever, but the rest of these 5 modes of novelty I see as, I mean, you can mix and match to your heart's delight to make something super entertaining for the long term on almost any platform at very low cost or free, and very convenient for players. So this isn't your first takeaway. Right now, immersion's very expensive and very inconvenient. Takeaway number 2 is people are still going to chase it. I mean, I mentioned these are not all created equal, right? I mean, agency is maybe a little fuzzier than throwing some goggles on a person's head and just watching the reaction. So again, immersion's powerful, and people will chase it, like any of these other sources of novelty. But in the end, cost and convenience are going to win. And what I suspect is that's just going to drive the price of these VR headsets down really, really fast. And eventually, once there's enough of them, as usual, the content will subsidize the cost of the hardware. So again, let's try and bring this back to something applicable, better games. I mentioned that you can mix and match these to your heart's delight, and you want to build games that stand out from the crowd. So I think it's interesting to look at what's been achieved so far on the platforms that have a lot of customers and have built successful games businesses. So these are the 3. Not VR. I'm not considering VR yet. There just aren't enough customers there. And in my view, again, I'm trying to slice these by: have there been really, really immersive experiences, or have there been experiences that are very offer a lot of freedom, like true sandbox games on these platforms? So this is how I see the state of achievement so far. PC being the most mature platform, it's been around the longest. It makes sense that what's possible, at least possible to date, or has been thought of to date, is closest to having reached its potential. Console and mobile, are newer. Consoles, of course, get refreshed, but console as a paradigm really has only been inhibited by one thing. You see the small green bar: connection. In the past, it's been very difficult to do much innovative in terms of connecting players or offering a connected gaming experience on consoles, because platforms they don't want to play well with each other. They don't want you to run your own technology or hardware. And only recently have they been sort of lifting their restrictions and being more open to, for example, Bungie and Activision running their own servers for Call of Duty and Destiny, things like that. And that's really starting to, in my view, unlock a lot of interesting potential. Mobile, again, and this is my take on this, but I think the comparisons are pretty easy to make if you look at any of these dimensions just compared to each other, like the depth available or the agency available in pinnacle achievements on PC and console versus mobile. So this is what I think the potential looks like. Again, we talked about that two-dimensional axis. I don't see any reason why mobile games can't be every bit as deep as PC and console games. Agency the same, connection absolutely the same. So on top of this, there's design challenges in figuring out how to offer something that fits with our usage patterns for these devices and whatnot. But this is, I think, a really good way to try and identify the opportunity in the space. So when I look at, if I were looking at, like, as from an investor standpoint, investing in a game studio that had a thesis or a plan of attack for building games and hopefully attracting and keeping players' attention, or if I was, running a game studio and you're thinking about your next project, what do you invest in? What can you build that will stand out from the crowd? These, I think, today are some of the best opportunities. This doesn't mean you can't win in PC. You absolutely can. You can, it's not like we've seen the end of innovation for any of these dimensions, but there's some real gaps, I think, in what's been invested in, both from a tech standpoint and just doing the hard design work, particularly on mobile, and for console, the reason I mentioned platform restrictions. So these are big opportunities, I think, for most even independent game studios right now. So this is a little abstract yet, and let's see, before I talk about that, I want to also mention that I did a lot of reading about, there's been so much talk about AR and VR, and I try and follow what some bigger studios are doing, what analysts think of the space, and I was just going through my newsreader last night, and this is not the newest story, but Blizzard's one of the developers I respect most in the world. They built the world's best MMO. They built arguably a lot of the world's best skills and mastery games. They're, I don't think anyone, I don't think this is controversial. They're fantastic. They also see the same kind of opportunity, I think, in mobile, probably because of what they've already achieved in PC. And I don't know about console yet, whether they're looking at offering more of an MMO experience or mapping what they have on the consoles. But I think if you look at the smart money in games, especially content, it's going to go to mobile for quite a lot longer. Okay, so I want to talk about the how a little bit, and I'm not sure how much time I have, but I'm getting close. So intentionally, I'm gonna wrap this up and offer some pointers. But this really points back to a talk I did last year at Casual Connect, and I think it's online on YouTube. But there's, again, lots of material about this kind of stuff, and you can talk to me afterward. But here's a few hints. How many of you play Destiny? No, a few. Okay. This is the tower in Destiny, and the tower is the function that the tower serves in most games lives in a pretty boring menu. It's dealing with your inventory, getting bounties, doing a lot of the meta, essentially, managing weapons and all that kind of stuff. In Destiny, for whatever reason, maybe they're I don't know if it was a playful thing or if they see real value in this. I see real value in what they did here, which is essentially just make this a playful shared space. There's nothing to accomplish in gameplay here. You just, when you go to the tower in Destiny, you get sent with 50 to 100 other players on some random instance of a server they're running for the tower, and sometimes your fire team of 3 or so comes with you, and you've got friends in there, but oftentimes it's just strangers. So you're in there doing kind of rote, boring things, and because you're in there with other people who, the function, the reason they went to the tower is relatively boring, but just because they're there, even in this semi-immersive mode of consuming the content, because they're there with other players, really cool, fun stuff happens. And my belief is that, this is part of building designs that take advantage of connection opportunities. So connection isn't just are you on the same leaderboard as somebody? It's also like do you feel like you have freedom when you know that you're doing something similar to other players in the game? So again, these guys are largely doing the same things functionally, but you have weird stuff like dance-offs and whatnot. And part of my thesis in building games and advising people about where I think opportunity lies is the novelty of this lasts longer than the novelty of this. This is one of the last pieces of content in the year one Destiny campaign, and add a fire team of 2 or 3 other players that, especially if you're friends with them, to this changes the equation a bit. But if you're soloing, even though this is all this is beautiful IP and fiction, you've got a lot of freedom to move around and explore. The skills and mastery involved in completing this campaign are substantial, but repeating this doesn't quite continue to attract players the way just going back to the tower does. So Yeah, the slide didn't go backwards, but let's talk about this. So my point is that Destiny Tower experience, probably better than the campaign experience. This is a Game of War. How many of you have played Game of War? I sure hope. If you're in a game design talk, you got to play this game. And I know it's ugly. I know it sucks. I know you hate the Kate Upton ads, probably the Mariah Carey ads too. It's not going to inspire anyone with its IP or fiction, but I'm telling you, the systems underlying it and these kinds of things that happen, this is a long time ago now. I mean, I played this game for about a year, invested pretty deeply in it, really because I was, I was curious what was attracting players to it and keeping their attention for so long. And a lot of these systems, one, every player in the game has a spatial relationship to every other player. These are sort of two views on it. The view on the right is a little bit more zoomed out. The view on the left is just one of these kingdoms. There are hundreds of them at this point. And every once in a while, a kingdom's ultimate goal, the wonder in the game, is contested. And it's contested by usually hundreds of players versus hundreds of other players. I don't think you could say there's lots of skills and mastery involved in attacking one other player, but cooperating with your alliance and communicating with them and timing things appropriately. There's a lot of skill and mastery in that. So my point is, this is powerful, and you shouldn't sleep on it. If you have any kind of role in game design, or if you're an exec at a game company, you got to study this game. And it's not new stuff, by the way. This is just an outlier. I mean, this game is like 2+ years old now. And no one's really done this on mobile other than Machine Zone. And when you look at Game of War, occasionally when it's in most countries it's #1 now. It goes back and forth with Clash. And again, it's not for everybody, but for the people that are attracted to its systems and its offering for skills and mastery, the connection on top of that, it makes for a very powerful combo. So my point is, that is better than this. If you're a top player in Clash, for the most part, this is how you're comparing yourself to other players. You rarely are in a shared space with more than just one other player. The way that your clan can benefit your play and your progress is pretty limited. So I talk a lot more about this kind of stuff in a talk I did last year, and I'm happy to talk with you guys more after this if you want. Again, there's lots of research to do. This is a talk I did last year. Again, the title of it, it's on YouTube, is Social Constructs, Shared Spaces. This is tough stuff, by the way. Looking back at Game of War, that's a tough design exercise, and it's not the same kind of design exercise as making the shooting of a gun really feel immersive or feel cool, but you should respect it. If your aim is to capture and retain players' attention for the long run, deliver them novelty in the long run, this is something you should study. So do the work, and thanks.
Hi. You talked a lot about how those dimensions vary according to the medium that you're playing on, but do they vary a lot also by genre?
They can, for sure. I mean, a lot of people consider sandbox a genre, or RPGs a genre. RPGs are generally their standout offering in among those 6 dimensions I described is usually depth. Sometimes it's depth plus connection, some limited form of connection. But yeah, I mean, you could consider genres as you could map these dimensions right onto a lot of genres that I think most people understand the definition of today. Some genres I think nowadays are getting pretty poorly defined, but yeah, I mean, you definitely got a point there. RPG, I think you could say it would probably be an interesting little thought exercise or mini analysis to go, okay, among what of these 6 modes of novelty are RPGs? How would you rate their delivery of those?
Just because there is a gap between where we could potentially be and where we could ultimately be on any given platform, wouldn't perfect market theory suggest that maybe if we're not there, we don't need to be in order to develop a successful game?
Well, 2 comments on that. One, I don't believe in perfect market theory.
Good answer.
It's easy to poke holes in if we had more time. But I think anytime you look at what's already been done as the definition of a market's potential, you should probably go work for somebody else. You really ought not be in a position to do big design work or lead a company.
So no, absolutely not is the answer.
Yeah, no.
Good one.
Yeah, that's never. I mean, if you Game of War is a great example of this on mobile. Right? Everyone thought in 2012 it was probably going to be Clash clones winning, and maybe that Clash was going to take mid-core. Nobody really wanted games with a lot deeper systems, let alone something as crazy as everyone having a spatial relationship to each other. And the bottom end was, not the bottom end, but the casual end of the spectrum was more, match threes, king-like games, hidden object games. And Game of War ignored 30-day retention. They ignored investment in IP and fiction. They ignored all sorts of things that is like common wisdom about how do you build a game in mobile that works. And instead, they just invested in their long tail, their long tail of players. And by long tail, I mean the people who are still playing after 30 days. They don't really give a shit, frankly, about their 30-day retention. But their day 180, their day 360, plus. I mean, those are significantly better than almost everyone in the industry because of the depth of systems and the layer of connection on top. And again, if Gabe Layden had listened to any of this, like the smartest industry people or the analysts, that game never would have been made. Instead, he took a little bit of a leap. It wasn't that big a leap if you just look at PC. If you just look at what works on the most mature platform out there, those kinds of experiences weren't on mobile, and a lot of them still aren't. For example, Game of War is, if you're into something other than PvP, dominate your neighbor style play, Game of War doesn't have much to offer for you. But any complete MMO, any successful MMO that lives on PC, typically offers multiple modes of progress, multiple styles of play, and those tend to intertwine and live in harmony with each other. Even Destiny on console, you can do PvE, you can do raids and campaigns, you can just do PvP. In a lot of MMOs, you can do pure resource trading, economy management. And again, those things can benefit each other, and often there are like social constructs that facilitate that explicitly by design. And I don't think these are hard leaps of imagination to make now for what will likely work on mobile in the future.
Hey, Brett, thank you very much for coming out and talking with us today. That was a fantastic overview. Love it.